Hello YouTube, it is Q Nix, and I am so happy that I finally get to bring this video to you. I apologize that I kept you all waiting more than a year for this. I appreciate everyone's understanding. I have, a lot going on in my life besides just schoolwork. I know that's my usual thing, is I'm busy with schoolwork, but I've been doing a lot more in my social life. I've been doing a lot more with my family, and, I'm just a busy guy. That being said, I don't really think that this video should have taken an entire year to make, and I definitely don't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. So, when I made the Abel logo last year in 2013, I told you all that it was filled to the brim with meaning. It was very important to me that I took a drastic step, and instead of making another iteration of my famous 9K logo, I put together this weird print symbol looking thingy, and I promised you all that it's a meaningful print symbol looking thingy. Well, I finally want to take this time to tell you some of the symbols and the meaning behind the design choices that I made when I created the Abel logo, and why I think that this symbol is more fitting for what I do and also more personally important to me than something like the 9K. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the bird motif. I really wanted to make this logo look avian, and the reason why is because when I made a channel post celebrating my 25,000 subscribers on YouTube, I did a Nickelodeon logo marathon, and I made a channel post thanking everyone, and I said about my channel and about the logo editing community flying into the future with an eye to the past. And I said this because I think of logo editing as being flying into the future, meaning that we're always trying to innovate, we're always trying to push the limits of our software, learn new things, and apply them in the most extreme way possible. However, I also said an eye to the past, because I think in a lot of the things we do, we keep our eye on traditional techniques. A lot of the things that we do are derived from tape cutting and old, video engineering effects. I myself have used old software, and of course we all use old logos. Or not we all, but most of us use old logos as well. So there's a historical component as well as a futuristic component. And when I put this thing in my post, it is something I came up with myself, but I thought that it was very profound of me to say that. So I wanted to make that my channel motto, and that's where everything started. So I really made this logo to conform to my motto, flying into the future with an eye to the past, which I think, as I just explained, it has a lot more personal meaning than my previous motto, which it was still meaningful. I explained that in my art exhibit. But I do think flying into the future with an eye to the past is very eloquent and very professional. Now, initially, I had planned to base this logo on vultures, because vultures are sometimes seen as symbols of transformation. However, I didn't want the logo to be seen as too dark and edgy, so instead I focused on an eagle motif, and really the difference ended up not being so big. I think I just had, larger wings with smaller sort of nubbed ends than I would have if I stuck with the vulture motif. Now, a YouTuber did say in the hint that I dropped for this logo that one of the hints that I included was a golden eagle, and they were correct, but I will say that there is no significance to me of the golden eagle specifically, besides the fact that I think it looks cool. Really, I was just going for an eagle motif in general. And the reason why I was looking at the eagle specifically is because my mother actually has assigned animal motifs, sort of like spirit animals, to me and my sister, and she has done this since we were very little. And to me, she assigned an eagle because of how she saw in me some like toughness and also, I think, later in life, intelligence. So that's a way of paying homage to this sentimental motif that my mother has sort of assigned to me. Now I want to move on to talking about the eye. I want to acknowledge that the eye looks very similar to the one used as album art in a video by Wildcat, where he makes a musical motif honoring my channel. I can tell you that the eye is not the same, but I do see the similarities, and I want to acknowledge that so that people know that I'm not trying to steal that from him. I actually chose the eye to appear as it did because I wanted it to be perfectly circular, and I didn't want to have the lines that I did in the Horizon logo where I have distinct rings of color, because I didn't want the logo to fall into overly simplified territory. I really wanted to have color gradients, kind of like I did with the Cubersun. Now, the specific colors that I chose, I inherited from the feathers. So they're similar to the ones that I used in the Cubersun and that set of colors that you see in some of my other logos, but they're not identical. Now, what actually inspired the color of the feathers? It's not obvious, but if you turn the logo a little bit and line it up properly, you will see that I actually chose colors that were inspired by the NTSC color bars. This is a pretty universal symbol representing television and media, at least in the NTSC world, and I didn't want to take these colors directly and put them onto the feathers because I thought that they were too bright and obnoxious, but I did want to have pleasant colors that were similar to them. So I mostly used the same colors, except I tended to focus more on halftones. So instead of having like an exact red, I had things like a purplish red or an orangey red. And instead of this bright turquoise, I have a darker greenish turquoise. But otherwise, there are a lot of similarities between these colors. Now, something that I didn't intend. This is interesting. There are 13 feathers here. Now, the only reason why I chose 13 feathers is so that it resembled the NTSC color bars, and also so that the feathers were alternating. I wanted 2 rows of feathers, but I didn't want to stack them directly on top of each other. I wanted them to be alternating like piano keys. Now, it just so happens that I made the Abel logo for my 13th anniversary, and I did not plan the number of feathers that way, but I was really happy when I found out later that there was this fortuitous hidden little Easter egg that I put in there. Now, I do want to also talk about IXK and 9K. I didn't want to completely abandon my former 9K motif. I wanted to do something different, but I wanted people to know that I was keeping an eye on the past. I was going to honor my previous logos. I was not going to replace them. So it's not obvious at first glance, but you'll notice that if you remove certain parts of the logo, that you can actually form the letters IXK. And this is actually something that I planned. I wanted the logo to have these letters hidden in there so that it wasn't completely getting rid of the old 9K motif. Now, there's no number 9 in here, but there is at least an IX. And the IX is also important because that is the suffix used in a lot of Unix and Unix-like operating systems. Now, if I didn't want to replace my former logos, if I wanted to pay homage to them, then why didn't I just make a 9K logo with a bird motif? You know, I could have easily taken the right half of my logo and put a 9 on the other side, and I would have been good. Well, now I want to get to the most important part of this logo, and also the namesake, the symmetry. This logo was inspired by what is called, and please correct me if I mispronounce this, I'm sorry, Abelian wave function symmetry. This is a concept in quantum chemistry which essentially says that if a molecule has certain symmetry properties, then the wave function will also have certain symmetry properties that conform to that. And the orbitals will either be symmetric or antisymmetric, meaning that they're identical to themselves except for a change in sign with respect to the symmetry operations that are present in the system. Now, this set of rules specifically concerns reflections along the XYZ axes, twofold rotations along those axes, and also inversion, which means taking every point in the system and essentially pushing it through a center to get to the opposite side. There are, I believe, some other rules dealing with systems with other types of symmetry, like threefold rotations, etc. But they're more complicated, and more importantly, the orbitals only have to conform to Abelian rules. So I really wanted a logo that had a lot of symmetry. And it so happens that if a molecular system has symmetry by reflecting along the XYZ axes, I guess maybe I should have said reflecting in the planes. But, you know, my point still stands. Reflection in 3 different spatial directions. If a molecule has these properties, it also has the property of symmetry along all the twofold rotations and symmetry on inversion. This symmetry group is called D2H. So this is what's called the largest Abelian subgroup, and quantum chemistry software can take advantage of symmetry very well when dealing with systems that have all of the symmetry. So I wanted to make a logo that conformed to this symmetry group. Now, in order to do that, I really only had to pay attention to the XY axes, or the XY plane, because in the Z direction, we're going to have symmetry anyway because the logo is 2D. It's perfectly flat. But what I ended up doing is I essentially designed a single quadrant of the logo, so just the upper left, and then I reflected it, and then I reflected it again to ensure that it was perfectly symmetrical, except if you zoom in a really lot, you'll notice that there's a tiny bit of misalignment, but you're not going to see that in any practical purposes. It also so happens that the Abelian wave function symmetry was the namesake for my logo. I called it the Abel logo in order to pay homage to that. Now, the sort of double meaning behind Abel is that I also mentioned the inspiration from the biblically accurate angels meme with these weird esoteric shapes that resemble life. And Abel is also a biblical name, so I figured that it would be a fitting name, along with all the other stuff I said, with this sort of hints at an angelic theme. I also get to talk a little bit about the Circuitry byline. So with the Circuitry logo, the Abel logo itself the symbol is exactly the same. I made no changes to it whatsoever. But I changed my channel name from just using generic text to the series of shapes. Now, the only thing I really have to say about this is that this is what's called an ambigram. This was inspired by an Escher painting, and my dad really loves MC Escher. And an ambigram is something that it is written and it's meaningful when you read it out, but it happens to be written in a way where if you flip it over, rotate it 180 degrees, it is identical to itself. Now, if this were a molecule, this title would have the C2H symmetry group because it doesn't have mirror symmetry, but it does have this twofold rotation. So this also conforms to an Abelian symmetry rule. I think that's really all I wanted to say. I don't know if I'm going to be doing what I did with the K-Points logo, where I sort of dive into the how did I make this, because I feel like publishing the files really gave away, or not gave away, but really sort of answered most of the questions about what the internal process was like. With the Abel logo itself, I didn't really have a lot of iterations. Like, I didn't have a history of, oh, first I tried this, then I tried that, then I tried this. The only thing that I will say is that in the hint that I dropped last year, I was inspired more by the Apple II symbol, and I was going to have the two halves separated in a way, but I decided to join them together so that I could have this letter I going on, and also so that I could have bird claws on the top and the bottom. And the same goes with the Circuitry logo. I really only had one prior iteration of this, which dealt more with circles and didn't have this sort of wire circuit board shape. But there's not a lot of design history behind these. That being said, I am perfectly happy to answer any questions that you have about either one. I really do want people to learn from this, and I really hope that now that I've sort of spelled out all the symbols that have gone into this logo, that you can understand why I made the decision to make this major leap away from the 9K motif that I've been using for years. This was something that was, to me, it was very important because I really wanted to do something kind of artsy. You know, I'm very fascinated by symbols, and not just symbols like, I mean, letters and numbers and squiggles, those kind of symbols. I mean, symbols that represent a greater meaning. And it was very important to me that I tried to merge all of these concepts that were important to me into a single logo that was also, well, I think at least, visually attractive. And I'm very happy with the positive reception that this got. I do expect, because of that any new iterations of my logo are going to be based on the Abel. Unless public opinion changes, I think that the Abel is the way to go, and the 9Ks are of the past. Thank you all for your patience. And as with the process, I'm also happy to answer any questions about the meaning. I'm sure I have not answered all of your questions just with this little recording, but I hope I've at least got you started on understanding why this was so important to me. And I also hope that it inspires you when you're making your logos. Think about things that are important to you in your life and things that make you happy. You know, this, Abel symmetry with quantum chemistry. Quantum chemistry makes me happy. I love quantum chemistry. And birds, I love birds. I dream about birds. And it also has sentimental value to me through my mother. So there's a lot of joy in this logo. And I hope that any logos that you design for yourself in the future have something in them that is meaningful to you and that makes you happy. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you all have a good day. Stay cubified or cunified, depending on which one you prefer.